IVM.
Hey everybody, welcome to another week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. As we go into God knows what week of the lockdown, we've been trying to make sure that we get as much content out to you as possible. We had some interesting episodes in the last week. Cyrus Says we had Angad Singh Ranyal on it. That was a fun episode to listen to. On the Filter Coffee podcast, we had Taslima Nasleen and Arunav Sinha on that. That was another great conversation. Karthik Srinivasan joined Varun on Advertising is Dead. And guys, look for Pratik Oswal on Paisa Vaisa podcast with Anupam Gupta. That was another great episode. I'd also like to let people know that the show that we're doing with Mr. Ashish Vidyarthi, Begin the Journey, is now going to be releasing 3 times a week. So do check that out. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. And let's get started with your show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a second episode of Football Shootball featuring Siva, Gaurav, Karthik, and me, John Dykes.
Damn, I cannot get over this.
This is amazing. This
awesome.
Is the highlight of this entire, I think, podcast series. So this is, I think, episode 37, if I'm not wrong, or 38 maybe. I have lost track completely because this is by far the highlight of this entire series that we've done. Thank you so much.
I'm just happy I found my new ringtone.
Listen, I've been doing this for 25 plus years, and I'm just happy that I got my first intro right, and I think I got the names more or less right, and I didn't stumble. And so it still is a case of, got that one right, hopefully. Anyway, let's carry on, shall we?
No, that's awesome. But there was this point, I think, in around 2010, where you left television in India. And I know this is when you left ESPN from Singapore. But for us, we're like, oh my God, John Dykes is no longer giving us the Premier League on our TV sets in 2010. And it took us some time. We had to look around and we were like, where is John?
There is a sense of betrayal in his voice, John, if you didn't catch on to it. But I just wanted to put that out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, trust me, I got a lot of that on social media. Look, let's start off by saying the biggest mistake anybody in my line of work can make is in thinking that it's all about them. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be honest with you. I was fortunate and have been fortunate to be associated with great channels, great brands, and in the Premier League, a fantastic brand. So, my success as it was, my career owed an awful lot to the fact that people were choosing to watch the Premier League first and foremost. And if I could get on there and not stink it up, and if I could introduce things and elaborate and enlighten and entertain, then so much the better. So let's be clear about that. But the other slightly unique thing I suppose you'd have to say about what I do is that I've never been somebody who works on like a major broadcaster broadcasting to a domestic audience. Mm-hmm. Bear with me, I'll explain what I mean. So I'm not like that sort of Gary Lineker on BBC. I'm not like even Anand Tyagi presenting the stuff he does on Star, to a domestic audience. I've always tended to work for a sort of a cable or satellite or whatever it may be, streaming company, whatever it may be, that actually tends to broadcast outside very often where I am. So I happen to live in Singapore, and for a long time, between 97 and 2010, I lived in Singapore, but we didn't always broadcast the Premier League into Singapore. So I was always broadcasting from a place overseas. Mm-hmm. Then what happened was, because of the nature of that, you kind of shift around a little bit in terms of, you're on in certain countries, then you're not on. So take Hong Kong, for example. I was on for 3 years in Hong Kong, then I wasn't on. And then suddenly we popped up. So I'd have friends sort of going, we miss you. It's not so much we miss you. It's like we miss what you're doing around that program, which was by and large the Premier League. So what happened at the end was in 2010, I left Singapore to move to England to work on the Premier League Global Channel. Now, it was actually a global content service, which is far more an appropriate term because it delivers a lot of content. And it delivered content to broadcast partners around the world who didn't, for one reason or other, put their own content around the Premier League feed. Mm-hmm. They were happy to take a 24/7 English language HD feed out of the UK, which wasn't broadcast in the UK, but which was theirs to use and to do with what they would. But that came with its own slight confusion because that meant that it was taken up, for instance, by SuperSport, a massive broadcaster in Africa that basically covers the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. And they have every sport going on there, but they had the Premier League and they used to take our feed. And what was fascinating was people there kind of thought I worked on a UK channel. They thought I was on Sky. They thought I might be on BBC. They couldn't quite figure it out. So in a way, I've tended to work on these things. And as far as the Indian example was concerned, you lost us. Yeah, you didn't have that feed for then, which meant that because I was no longer in Singapore broadcasting for ESPN and Star, it means you didn't see me until Star did the deal to take the Premier League content service, whereupon, bang, I'm back up. But that still confuses people. Because I would travel around the world and people would say, where are you? Yeah. Do you live in England? Do you live in Singapore? Do you live in Hong Kong? Do you live in India? Do you live in Dubai? Where are you? And that's a product of working on this kind of a feed. And also, when you make a generic feed like that, channels brand it their own way. And so very often people thought I worked for XYZ channel, whereas I didn't. I just happened to be on a feed that they showed.
Yeah, that's amazing because I remember you briefly came back to our TV sets. Was that 2005, 2006? I don't remember the exact year. But then we have a fantasy football league that we've played from university. So a couple of our seniors in college, and we've played that for I think a good 9 years now. And in the middle, that league was, and I can't make this up, was called The Return of John Dykes. And I'm sure I will send them this clip, and this will make our day.
That just made my day. That's really made my day. It's fantastic. And the other thing as well that would have confused people a bit was that because Star was a very valued broadcast partner of the Premier League, I had a legacy, obviously, relationship with audiences in India going all the way back to the days when I did Cricket World Cup and other sports, for instance. So I think they were aware of that. It was encouraged that when possible, I would go over to India and do some work with Star. And so that's why you'd find me popping up, doing some promos when they rolled out their HD TV service. You'd find me over there working on Indian Super League in the early days. If I could, I'd pop over and do some work. I went over there and I actually trained a lot of their presenters, a lot of their talent as well. So I think in a way that added to the confusion a bit. People sort of thought, hang on, is he here now? So I was always that sort of international man of mystery.
If I'm not mistaken, you were here for some of the fan parks as well for the ISL, and I think you were in 2014 when it launched.
Yeah, I was actually, if you think about what I did in India, it was interesting. I went for the ISL, working with Star and working with the Super League itself. I was actually there for the first season, and I was there for the player draft at the start of the second. So I'm glad I was involved in that. I went to Mumbai with the very first BPL Live that we did there, which was just incredible. Obviously, you know the concept, fan fest thing, massive stage, huge screen. We had 35,000 fans down there in Mumbai, and it was just remarkable. I was on stage with Robbie Fowler and Peter Schmeichel and just looking out, and of course we basically hooked this thing on a Liverpool-Manchester United game, the big rivalry, and fans turned up for it. It's just incredible. We did that there. We did a similar one in Cape Town, I think the following year, and again, massive crowds. Just an amazing thing to be part of.
No, that's awesome, because I think at that point of the ISL, it was still this marquee big ticket event. It is till date as well. It's currently India's top league. But then they had gotten movie stars from India. They had gotten the likes of Del Piero, Trezeguet. Who else was there? Ljungberg was there. Perez.
I waited at the airport for Perez, so that's my claim to fame.
Yeah. So, but then the ISL, you've obviously been back in Asia. You've been following it. How does it currently compare to probably the other leagues in Asia? I think the number of marquee players that come in has fallen, but I think a lot of circles, they say that has probably improved the quality of the league. The players are becoming better by playing with players who are maybe not past their prime, by playing under coaches who are coming here not as a retirement home.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll try and keep this as concise as I can. And obviously this is me looking at it from a distance. I haven't worked on the league for the last couple of years, but we do show it on Fox here in Singapore, and I keep a close eye on it. And of course, I've got friends like Paul Macefield, and I know Anand Tyagi very well, who work on it. So I take a real interest in it. First thing I would say is this: patience, people. Patience. I've read these articles over the last couple of years saying, Indian Super League has blown it. It's a failure. It's not this. That's absolute nonsense. You're only 5-6 years into this thing. It takes so long to develop. It has done so much. It has achieved so much in that time. As far as the makeup, the marquee names were needed to kickstart it. The marquee names were part, particularly in tandem with the whole sort of, Bollywood stars and cricketers being involved. I think that was a hugely successful policy of getting out into the broader populace. Now, back in the days when you guys first watched me on ESPN Star, I was acutely aware that what was happening in India was that a degree of ignorance about just how fast spread and widespread the popularity of football was. People kept saying, you have to go down to the Salt Lake. It's all about East Bengal and Mohun Bagan, and that's everything like that. But I knew that on Football Focus, I was getting a very, very football literate, educated, insightful comments and questions from fans in Delhi and in Mumbai and in the places where I've been told that there weren't many football fans. So I knew it was there. So when I saw the ISL come along, and when I saw, that first season in particular and the tremendous attendances and Kolkata winning it in the end, I thought to myself, this is going places. But I also thought at the time, you've got to bridge the gap between the grassroots and the megastars, these slightly older superstar names that are coming in here. And I think the challenge for the league was twofold. Firstly, it was to do that. It was to work on the grassroots. It was to try and bring up the standard of the grassroots Indian talent. And then secondly, the other thing it had to do was to establish this commonality. Now, obviously, with the I-League and the ISL, this was a situation that was going to be awkward. But from what I can tell from that Asian Football Confederation roadmap, they're moving towards a situation now where obviously ISL is preeminent in terms of supplying, I think it's Goa this time around, to Champions League football. Then you will have representation in the AFC Cup. It's difficult to compare it with other leagues around Asia because every country around Asia that is growing, with the exception of the J-League, which has been around for a very, very long time, is extremely established, has its own unique set of circumstances. But I think one thing that the Indian football clubs can do is to use the regional competitions for their own good. For example, I was doing a bit of work with the kind of guys who play for a club in the Philippines right now. And the Philippines is trying to kickstart football and get it going. And there's one club down there that really is preeminent. They're called Ceres Negros FC. They win the Philippines League year in, year out. But they really challenge themselves when they play in the AFC Cup. And they take on ASEAN competition around Southeast Asia. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be a model that the Indian clubs should be pursuing. Then, according to the roadmap that I saw, I think ultimately they're going to move towards a degree of promotion relegation. I think the AFC quite rightly says you need a bigger league. You need more teams. You can't be getting by with 10 or 12 teams. It's got to be bigger. So, but again, remember, if by 2024 you've got a situation, premium league, there's another league below it, then you've got regular Indian representation on the regional competitive club football level, and if the national team continues to improve, then I would say that is incredibly great progress in a decade. And then I would say if you ally to that infrastructure development, and then you'll see the big Western clubs, European clubs especially, arriving, then I would say Indian football will have gone a very, very long way.
I think that's a fantastic point. It brings me to a question. But before that, you just mentioned 35,000 people gathered at the Fan Park. That's more people than what Sellers Park gets for any of their matches, I guess.
Oh my God.
But the interesting point with success, and did Leicester's victory and the Premier League will change anything in Southeast Asia? Or do you think it makes more sense for entrepreneurs and businesses to go and invest more in successful clubs? I know there's a Wenky's who invested in Blackburn and Mitchell's invested in a club in England, and there's so on and so forth. But will that change anything in particular? Has Leicester City's league championship changed anything in particular in Southeast Asia?
Well, I think certainly Thailand, obviously because of the family that owns them and all that they did. There's a stronger following now for Leicester City in Thailand. Commercially, you see them doing far more deals in Thailand, but also around Asia more broadly. And I think as well, it's no coincidence that Leicester are now a strong club once again in terms of pushing, as they are this season, for a top 4 finish. Definitely looking like a club that on its day can take on just about anybody. And I think they are building heroes and stars of their own within that club. So, if you look at the likes of Maddison and Barnes and others, they are really growing. And I think one thing that we know about this is stereotypical and rather broad as an assumption, but we do know that the Asian fan likes very much to follow celebrity players as much as it does teams. So I think the fact that Leicester's now capable of attracting and building its own superstar players will very much endear it to fans. Maybe in China, they took that step getting into a Weibo thing over there, and as a result, they're building up a fan base. But I think I think sometimes Southeast Asia, people just throw that out there. They're very different countries in this region. I think Leicester City in Thailand, yes. And then because of their broader success, because everyone in Southeast Asia follows the Premier League, they are picking up fans. So I think Leicester is a good example of how you go about things. But, in the Premier League really helps as well.
Yeah. Now let's get into some fun stuff. You, John, obviously you've met arguably the best footballers in the world over the past 20 years. So what we want are some anecdotes. And how were you not intimidated by Roy Keane when you had to interview him? Like, I think he intimidates us on television. Like, I don't know how you were sitting across him and were not intimidated.
Well, everyone mentions Roy Keane, don't they? I tell you what I'll do. Staying with Manchester United, the most intimidating thing you could ever do, especially in the noughties when I started doing it. And I would go over to Britain on a regular basis and we'd host matches on site. We'd go and do interviews and what have you. The most intimidating thing you could do would be to go to a Sir Alex Ferguson press conference, because you just knew that if you asked a question that he didn't like, if he happened to just not be in a particularly good mood, or anything else like that, you could find yourself on the receiving end. You could be belittled, you could be bullied, quite frankly. And so you always sat there just saying, right, let's get this question right. Let's just read the room. Let's not mess this one up. So that was the most intimidating thing I ever would do. I've obviously offended the dog there by talking about Sir Alex, but that's right. So I have a lot of respect for him.
But she is an Arsenal fan's pet, so I don't blame her.
Oh, okay. But going on the Roy Keane, the first time I worked with Roy Keane was when we were at the City of Manchester Stadium, the Etihad, for the game that I think ultimately was the one that was setting City up to clinch the title. It was when Company scored and they won 1-0 against Manchester United. And we went up there and we did an on-site broadcast. And Roy came along. Now, Roy had really not done much TV at that stage, but I kind of knew because I'd seen him once or twice, and I thought, oh, wow, we're going to have to be good here. Sorry, I spoke to my producer beforehand. I said, what do you think? And he said, look, just be professional. Be yourself. Just, ask the questions you normally would. And Roy was fantastic. Roy came in, I wouldn't say suspicious, but a little bit wary. Once he realized that we were for real, we were a proper show, that we did things professionally, then he relaxed and he offered some great insights. He was great company. Very often the best moments are those when we've thrown to the game, Martin Tyler or whoever it is, Peter Drury doing their commentary, and we're just watching. And that's when you get the real insights. And that's where I can tell you stuff and can't tell you stuff, because that's when, you have a private moment that you're very privileged to be in that position. If I find myself sitting watching a game of football alongside Ryan Giggs or Alan Shearer or Roy Keane, I know that it's not a position that I would ever ordinarily find myself in. I'm only in that position because I do what I do for a living. And I think as soon as you sort of forget that and become a fan, then you're in trouble. So I was always really respectful of guys like that. But someone like Roy, if they chatted with you, if they found what you were saying about the game interesting, and let's face it, the guy had done everything in football. That was probably the most pleasing thing for me. So I enjoyed Roy. No, I didn't have any problems with him.
That's awesome. It's also when watching them play, I would have never thought a Gary Neville and Carragher combo would be that good as pundits. Sometimes when you look seriously at when you look at when players play, and then now they are arguably the most insightful pair on television, and I can name you so many. Is this ex-footballer coming into, again, in quotes, your space? Now there are a lot of ex-footballers who are also anchors. Is that something that you see happening more and more as we go along in this sports media industry? Like, I know Karun Chandok for Formula One. He's become a full-time commentator. He also does for Star Sports. There are so many such examples. So is that something? How would you as a presenter feel about that switch that's happening?
I think it's a really good question. Really good question. It's something that I've been thinking about and talking about for many years now. Okay, let's just spin that round. If you flip it around to doing what I do for a living, for example, I think it's really important for you to understand why you're doing something. Sometimes I read interviews with presenters or people who want to be presenters, and they say, well, above all, first and foremost, I'm a fan. Well, no, you're a broadcaster, because what you have to be first and foremost. Of course, we all love sport and we're all passionate and fans and what have you. And we want to relate and engage. But no, you have to be a professional broadcaster first and foremost. That is what you're paid to do. So that's what I would say about my role. I think, the minute you forget that, then you're in trouble. As for sportsmen and women moving into roles that I do, what have you. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. But again, you are no longer the sports person. You are the TV presenter, which means you need to execute the basics. You need to deliver properly. You have to work to a break count. You have to count. You have to throw to commentary. You have to make sure that you're engaging. You have to do all the right things. You have to have your knowledge, your research, your background. You have to understand how to interview people. So I think, if you can do that, fine. There's a big difference between being a pundit and being a presenter. Big difference. And not that many crossover. So I think, if provided you tick all those boxes, that's great. I do sometimes get a little bit frustrated when I see sports people interviewing other sports people, because I do get the sense that you don't have the same journalistic instincts, because you've been media trained for much of your life not to answer difficult questions. Therefore, you might not ask the difficult question. Yes, you'll have some insights, and yes, you'll actually break down any reserve the other guy has, because the guy respects you and knows you already. So that's in their favor. So that means that maybe this guy can get that interview in a way that I couldn't, because he's a famous footballer. But once the interview starts, then I'm listening and I'm thinking to myself, are you going to ask the right questions? Are you going to follow up at the right time? Are you going to sense when the moment is right to go down this way or go down that way? So that's where I think they have to be a little bit careful in taking this away from the journalists and the professional broadcasters.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the two best teams currently. We've seen over the last, City have dominated. Like you mentioned, 5 titles for United in the previous decade. City have, is it 4? Is it 4 in this decade they do? And Liverpool are doing so well. We spoke about Sir Alex Ferguson. We spoke about Arsene Wenger. We spoke about how Jose Mourinho changed the game. After that, it has to be these two, no? It has to be Guardiola, who probably changed European football and world football for, I don't know for the better or not, but he's changed it in a certain way. And then Jurgen Klopp has come in and become this affable manager who everyone loves. And he's taken a club with using a certain set of resources, good resources, in fact, but he's taken the club forward in a way that probably nobody expected 4 years ago when he joined Liverpool. And when in his first season, he really didn't do that well.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that people like rivalries. People like to try and, play one person off against another or anything like that. I always look at the great managers, and I think that you're great for a reason. Mourinho, for example, was very good at, I think, scouting opposition, understanding weaknesses, developing a tactical format that would work for them. Ferguson, for so many years, I think as much as anything, he was just an amazing manager, just incredible in terms of the way he managed his players. Then you look at Pep Guardiola. I've got some books behind me. I've got a couple of Pep books over my shoulder there. You just go through you have to remember what a really amazing footballer he was at a football club. It was just, you couldn't have a better education in football than come from that whole sort of Cruyff background, really. So to take somebody like that and then to have the passion and the desire to want to coach in a way that, satisfies the philosophy of the game that you have, or to expand upon something that you've already been told, I think he's a fascinating case, and I think he's demonstrated it, in Spain, Germany, and England, that he can do that. Klopp, I love. Klopp's a very different one. Klopp is somebody who I think takes the man management thing to just another level, in terms of being able to get players to play in certain ways. Now, I know coaches from Neil Warnock to Sam Allardyce have had requests and requirements of players. You must physically do this. You have to run till you can't run anymore. But for a guy to get a team to consistently play with so much pace and verve and attacking flair, as we've seen, remember at Dortmund, and let's not forget that. Everyone seems to sort of, forget about his achievements there. Klopp's amazing. But they're all different in their own way. They all bring something different to it. And in his case, he uses the big, goofy, bear huggy thing to try and deflect from the fact that he's a serious, tough, competitive man who I wouldn't want to cross. I think he could be a pretty harsh boss, and he gets results. Pep Guardiola, he comes across cerebral, this, that, and the other. But you also have to have a bit of an edge and anger, and it has to hurt when you lose. That's what these guys all have in common. They hate losing, and that's why they succeed. So, yeah, I think those two are doing different things from what we have seen, and I think the Mourinho thing has been proved not to work anymore. Being negative, playing on a team's weaknesses, sitting up defensively. We've moved on from that, haven't we?
Yeah, so that brings me to something that I think we moved on from after Roy Keane, but this guy has since become, of course, my favorite footballer ever, and he then became a manager. Thierry Henry, you mentioned you had the opportunity to interview him a couple of times. Any memory that stands out for you? Anything that you can share?
Yeah, Thierry Henry. As a footballer, funny enough, I think we all like football for different reasons. We all come to it for different reasons. When I was growing up, I didn't play a whole lot of football. I mean, I played at school and I sort of ran around, but I was more of I liked running. I ran cross country until I got a bit stronger and I could run track. Then I loved running track, 200, 400 meter, stuff like that. So I loved running. I loved athletics. I loved watching the great sprinters and runners. And so when I watched cricket, for example, I was far more interested in Michael Holding because of the way he just glided into the crease, just that beautiful approach and delivery. So I loved him. I idolized him as a guy who played a bit of cricket myself. It could never be anything like that, but I just loved that. So funnily enough, when I saw Henry come along and I saw just the way he moved, just that beautiful economy of motion and the pace he had and the ability as you do when you emulate him to open up his body and just put the ball in the far post, having cut it. He just did things sublimely. The one where he just flicked it up and hooked it over his shoulder against Manchester United. Just so many amazing moments. So this was the guy who I absolutely adored as a footballer, without being an Arsenal fan. Just as a fan of football and athleticism, I adored him. When I got to interview him the first time, he was in his pomp. We went along to Arsenal's training ground, and these things are very much cloistered and guarded, and time with the players, especially in the Premier League, but we got time, and he came into the room and he was absolutely charming. He'd been training. He had a 20-minute slot, but ended up taking 25, 30 or something like that. And what was lovely about his interview was he sat there and he went wherever I wanted to go. I asked him a question about his childhood, and he spoke about inner city problems in Paris. He spoke about racial divisions. He spoke about things that, unfortunately, later on would have come to the fore in that country. I think he spoke about father-son relationships. He talked about the impact his father had on him. And he just took the conversation in areas that I just, on a human level, found so fascinating. I'm thinking, this is Thierry Henry, and he's talking to me about these things that have influenced him. Wonderful, really, really wonderful stuff. And then I went and interviewed him when he was at Barcelona. Difficult to get hold of him then. It was a tougher ask to get him. He was a little bit more guarded, but again, he made time for us. He remembered the previous interview. We opened up, and just a really special guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're nearing the end, and I think Gaurav wants to do a little rapid fire. But before that, if you could, these interviews as well, probably the best content from you that people have seen. Where can they go and find it? Is it available on YouTube? Or if you can give some recommendations out to your content and the best stuff that you have done.
Yeah, well, one of the blessings about being somebody from another era, i.e., a senior presenter, as it were, is that I've done all these wonderful things. One of the curses is back then we were nowhere near as good at collecting and compiling and collating stuff. So unfortunately, I was putting together some showreel stuff recently just to put some stuff on a website, just say, oh, here's some stuff I do. And unfortunately, I was looking back and I couldn't find any of, I did sit down one-on-one interviews with Alan Shearer and Dennis Bergkamp and guys like that. And Gary Neville, you mentioned Gary Neville earlier on. I just, give me 30 seconds, I'll tell you a quick story. We went to Old Trafford, went to Carrington once to interview a few players. We did Van Nistelrooy, great. Gary Neville got injured in training, went off to a hospital. The PR girl said, sorry, can't do it, cancelled. We're like, no, we're flying back to Singapore tomorrow. We've got to do the interview. No, sorry, nothing doing. He rang us and said, well, I rang her, told her to come in and said, right, guys, I know that this is an urgent interview. I know how much it means to you. Make your way downtown. He gave us the address of his apartment. His partner let us in to his penthouse apartment, and he said, I'll get there as soon as I can. He came straight from the hospital, and he gave us a fantastic 45-minute interview, which is why I knew he was always going to be a success in the media. So there you go. That's a Gary Neville story for you there. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
I think this entire podcast is built on sidetracks, John. I think that is the best part of this podcast.
No, that's awesome. So Gaurav, are you set? Shall we finish it with a bang?
Gaurav, I'm telling these anecdotes to just try to avoid the quiz, to be honest with you. I'm not always the best at these.
No, I've just made it easy for all of us, especially me, actually, because I'm not answering questions. But each of you get 3 questions to answer. If you pass, the other ones can, take a chance at guessing what the answer is. Pretty simple. We're looking at largely 2000 to 2010, that era. John, you're the guest on the show. I'm going to start with you first. Quickly. Yeah, let's do that. Which player holds the record of most appearances in the PFA Team of the Year?
Wow.
You mean in that decade?
In that decade, I don't think there's any other player, even in the current decade, that has surpassed him.
PFA Team of the Year. Okay, let me think. In that decade, how long did he stay there? Gerard?
That's right.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Excellent. Okay, Karthik, next one's for you.
Mm-hmm.
These three players have received the most number of red cards in the Premier League. Who are they?
Oh, wow. Patrick Vieira, Joey Barton, Balotelli. Yeah, I mean...
You got Vieira right. Anybody else wants to take a hit?
Red cards. Roy
I'm going to
Keane?
go with Richard Dunn.
Yes, that's right. So it's Richard Dunn, Patrick Vieira.
One more person. Did someone say Keane?
I said Roy Keane, yeah.
And that's not right.
Okay, I'm just gonna give, no, it's a quick hint. An Everton legend, if I may say so.
Leighton Baines?
Duncan Ferguson.
Ferguson. Oh.
There you go.
Shivram, I'm coming to you
Thanks.
since you managed to get John with us for this. I'm going to go easy on you.
Thanks.
This player has the most Premier League appearances.
Alan Shearer. No? Thierry Henry.
No.
Ryan Giggs.
Ryan Giggs.
No, it's actually Gareth
Barry.
Oh, Gareth Barry.
Oh, yeah.
Of course. Did you say this was the easiest?
Yes, it was.
Thanks.
Karthik, since you got the hardest one, supposedly, and I hope you get the next one. Which player has played for 8 different Premier League clubs? 8.
Okay, I'm sure there's more than one, but I would say Craig Bellamy.
No.
Anelka.
Anelka.
No, it's Marcus Bent.
Oh, wow. Marcus Bent.
Yeah,
I only remember him playing for Aston Villa most of it.
Nice.
He started off at Ipswich, didn't he? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Everton in the middle somewhere, was it?
Yeah.
Australian Everton as well, yes. Okay, Shivram, next one for you. We already spoke about Mourinho, the legend.
Mm-hmm.
This regarding him. Jose Mourinho has signed this player twice during his Premier League stint. Who is this player?
He signed him twice.
That's an easy one, man.
Well, now you're telling me it's an easy one. There's even more pressure for me to know. I'm just so lost. Wait, he's signed him twice. I can't remember. I don't know, man.
John, Karthik, anybody?
Chelsea?
Matic.
Matic.
Yes, Nemanja Matic.
Bam.
Chelsea and for United.
Of course.
John, the next one's for you. Which manager in the Premier League era has managed the most number of Premier League clubs? The number of clubs being 7. 7 different clubs.
Wow.
Oh, how many did Allardyce have?
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Sam Allardyce, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, last 3 questions, one for each. Shivram. Yeah. Shivram, this one's for you.
Yeah, let's lose quickly.
we all remember the Aguero moment,
course.
right?
Yes.
Dude. We know he hit the goal. Who was the one to provide the assist?
Balotelli. Yes! He only had 1 assist that entire season, and that was that one.
1 assist the whole career in the Premier League.
Yes.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Karthik, slightly difficult, but I hope you can get this. Former England goalkeeper has the most number of assists in the Premier League.
Paul Robinson.
Yeah, can you tell me how many assists?
Very good.
Well done,
How many?
Karthik.
How many? 2.
5
assists.
Five
My God.
assists.
That's okay.
5.
Okay, we'll end with an interesting question. This one's for John, of course. This is about a current Liverpool player that has an anti-Arsenal clause in his contract, which means that if his release clause is activated, he's free to negotiate with any other club but Arsenal. Who are we talking about?
A current Liverpool player.
Yes, who has an anti-Arsenal clause in his contract.
Oh, my goodness me. Does that mean he came from Spurs or...
There is an ex-Arsenal player in Liverpool right now. That could be him.
That's what I was thinking about, yeah, but it's not like he can't go back, right? So it's not like Oxlade-Chamberlain, right? So, yeah. somebody with an anti-Arsenal. Is there such a thing as an anti-something clause?
I
did not know till yesterday.
I've never had this one before. And presumably this is because for some reason or other he grew up supporting Spurs, or he for some reason doesn't like Arsenal.
No, I'll give you a hint. This is something that Liverpool have done because Arsenal did something similar.
Oh wow!
Oh yeah, that was the £1 thing, right?
Yeah, the Suarez thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you listen. I don't know who the player would be, but obviously it was that Suarez thing. Yeah. So let's say Salah.
No, actually, you guys want to take a shot?
I don't know, Mane.
I was just going to say Mane.
Oh, no, it's actually Roberto Firmino.
Roberto Firmino.
Damn it.
Yeah, you can't see him on the pitch, but he's there.
But he won't be. He won't be for Arsenal. Okay, that's an interesting one. I've never heard that.
That's awesome.
So that's fantastic. So I'm guessing I won the quiz, right? No.
I don't think anyone was keeping track, but thanks.
It's the taking part.
Yes.
Yeah, to quote Ravi Shastri, football is the winner.
No, that's fantastic. John, any last parting words? We hope you had a good time. Firstly, from Gaurav, from Siva, and from myself, we hope you had a great time. Any parting words to our listeners? I'm sure there'll be plenty for these 2 episodes that we've done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. Whenever I get a chance to engage with football fans in India, I spoke earlier on about how I always had this tremendous belief that there was a huge fan base, and you guys are just examples of that within India. It's been wonderful. I would never ever take any credit for anything, but just being part of the growth of that has been fantastic. And I'm still doing what I do. You might not see me on the live broadcast of the Premier League anymore, but I'm currently with Fox here in Singapore. Now, we've just been taken over by Disney, which means that ESPN is back in the frame, so you'll see a lot more ESPN content, and you may just see me involved in ESPN content as we go forward. But basically, I'm always conscious of the Indian fan base. I am looking forward to different ways in which I can engage with you guys going forward, whether it means on the ground in India or broadcasting or whatever it may be. But in this engaged and connected age, everyone should be able to find me via my John Dykes Show Facebook page, which is available to everybody, and all sorts of things that I'm sure you'll be able to help me promote. Thanks very much, guys. A pleasure being with you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. This was amazing. And I think I'm repeating myself, but this was awesome, and this will continue to be a highlight for a long time to come. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, keep healthy, keep well, and anything you need, just feel free to follow up and ask or whatever.
So if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I'm Fickleberry Han on Twitter and Instagram. That's Huckleberry Finn, but Fickle.
And if you want to reach out to me, I am Sapre on Twitter and G Sapre on Instagram.
You can reach out to me at iRant, which is IYERANT on Twitter and Instagram. This is Football Shootball. Recognize.
Are you looking for India's most awesome cricket podcast? Are you now tired of listening to the same old guys drone on about cricket everywhere? Edges and Sledges is a weekly cricket podcast hosted by 3 fans of the game, Varun, DJ, and myself, Ashwin. It was established in early 2018, has over 60 episodes now, and is of course now proud to be on the IVM Podcast Network. Each week, we get together from 3 different time zones, the USA, the UK, and Singapore, and we talk about things from the world of cricket, with a focus on Indian cricket. We often interview special guests from all around the world, including former cricketers and cricket media personalities. So check out Edges and Sledges, the cricket podcast, now on the IVM network.
Beta, did you know 79% of all scientists in NASA are Indian only?
देखो, इंडिया में टैक्स सिर्फ मिडिल क्लास भरती है. Everyone is just enjoying free यार.
आजकल के youngsters are only interested in partying and enjoying. उनको देश की पड़ी ही नहीं है.
बेटा तुम बस शादी कर लो, उसके बाद तो you can enjoy life like anything.
I will tell you what this country needs. This country needs 15 years of dictatorship. That is the only way to become a superpower. See the Chinese, how much they've progressed.
सुनो, तुमने ये WhatsApp forward देखा?
So what's common between all of these statements?
They're all absolutely rubbish.
Fake WhatsApp forwards that spread like wildfire.
And statements that defy any logic.
We are here to debunk them all.
We're your family WhatsApp group's worst nightmare. We're what happens when you read a book.
Basically, we're just a bunch of guys who want to cut through the bullshit of everyone saying this, how it won't be true.
So that the next time someone confidently squeezes out some WhatsApp or Twitter BS, you can look them dead in the eye and go, Uncle, please sit.
So join me, Joel.
And me, Tushar.
Every Mondays for a fresh new episode of Uncle, Please Sit.